Marvin Divine. I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris, live in Central Pennsylvania. A special broadcast today, a conversation with yet another participant in CNN's recent documentary, Misinformation, White Genocide, which is somewhat misleading from my perspective. This has been a guest in the program previously. We met in person in the past at AfriForum Theater in Pretoria, among other places. And this, of course, is the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Orania Beweging. I mispronounce it in Afrikaans, but the Orania movement there in the Northern Cape. This is, of course, Joost Strydom. Joost, how are you doing today? What's going on?
I'm doing well. I think the final time we last met was actually on your home turf, and I got a nice tour. And yeah, that was the last time that we had a good contact and connected well, and also did a conversation. Thank you for having me again. Thank you for giving the opportunity to discuss what happened in the news on CNN and this Misinfo Nation program and all the silly little details that is coming out now.
Well, indeed, it was a fascinating experience from my perspective. A lot of people said to me, Chris, why in the world? Well, first of all, I got to say, I like your background, the minimalist background. Now I'm envious. I'm going to have to take some of the stuff off my shelf. That's very, very, very sparse and very Spartan and very sharp looking. But people said to me, Chris, why did you do this with CNN? You know who CNN is. Why did you trust them? And I said, well, look at it from my perspective. I gained the following: a free trip to Birmingham, Alabama. They paid for the flight, free accommodation. They took care of that. I got to meet CNN executive. I've met past CNN executives, but I got to interview South African refugees in person. That was my first in-person interview since I did the one in Pretoria East with Thea van Staden before they even left for the States, the one that I embargoed until they landed safely. So I got to see South Africans on U.S. soil, living life as refugees over here and how they're adapting, meet the families. So that was personally fulfilling. I got lots of footage from that and interview from that. And then on top of that, I got to see how this organization works, CNN, because they contacted me on a false premise, and then they did something completely different. And people said, "Are you disappointed you're not in the documentary?" I'm like, "Well, actually, I think I dodged a bullet, Joost, because it's a hack job. It's an assault on Trump, and it's an effort to perpetuate a narrative that the political left creates about this white replacement theory and white genocide, terms they come up with that try to beat people in the center and right about it." So you were in this documentary. For some reason, Donnie O'Sullivan decided it was critically important to travel to Orania to make his argument about whatever he was trying to make. And so how did you get involved in this project?
Interesting. Now that you say that, there's a kind of a perception on why they want to connect. And at the end of the day, the story and if you lived it, if you participated in it, you see how they cut your replies and cut out certain things and strategically put one thing next to another thing that doesn't necessarily genuinely portray the way that the conversation did flow and so on. So very interesting. They reached out to us and said they're interested in Orania with the refugee thing going on and so on. And it was quite clear then when they arrived that although they pretend to be open and be here to learn about the situation in South Africa, that their primary goal is to attack President Trump and to from that get a certain narrative of their own, which is very interesting because the entire premise of the, shall I say, documentary or the hit piece was to portray that people in South Africa and in the US are driving a certain narrative, which very clearly is the same thing that Donnie O'Sullivan and the likes are doing. Yes, that was I would say, typical CNN thing. But at the end of the day, I think there is no bad marketing. The opportunity to get Orania's name out there for us, support is critical. We need political support in these days. I think temperatures in South Africa are rising in terms of relations and so on. So it is quite important to have friends. And at the end of the day, even when watching a hack piece documentary like this, Orania always gets new friends.
Well, Joost, that of course begs the question. A lot of people say, why do you give all these press people access? And my answer to that is if you don't, then that becomes fuel for a fire that you're hiding something. You have nothing to hide. You're being transparent about what you're doing there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is you said, in your case, there is no bad press. But I mean, look, I mean, you get attacked by these people all the time. I remember watching a hack piece from a Nigerian/British journalist who's confined to a wheelchair who recently went to Orania. And then after you see him smiling and laughing and joking, hanging out, going to church services and having coffee with people and conversations, has the audacity, the temerity to go online and say he was terrified, he was afraid. Oh my God, it was so horrible. I was so scared as a black man in Orania. I mean, what was this guy taking? Crack cocaine? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, to start with your second comment, you used the word audacity. To spend a week in Orania, or almost 10 days in Orania, and to spend that time frame here and live in absolute safety, being welcomed actually by the people of Orania because we are good-natured people, and handled really, treated very, very, very well, very, very fair, even though there's this constant effort to get people to have an emotional response, and that's by framing questions in a specific way, touching sensitive subjects over and over and over again, and despite all this, still being hosted with hospitability and so on. And that is, in the end of the day, it reflects bad on those people. They think they drive a narrative, they think they prove something. In the end of the day, they rip their own legs from underneath them, and people see them for what they are. That that entire idea that they think they have the invisible cloak, but actually the king is naked. That thing they just tell on themselves. It is, people can clearly see that they are treated well, and they try to frame these things though they are kind of treated bad or being attacked or whatever here in Orania. But it's absolute nonsense. The mere fact that such a journalist, a black guy, can spend time in Orania and have genuine reactions to his comments and his questions and so on is proof that Orania is just a community with people with ideas and ambitions and so on. And they try to twist it, and it fails time and time again. Not only the strong online reaction of people who saw through the nonsense he was portraying, but also internally in the community. Just, we can laugh it off. They try so hard to be taken serious. Terrified, used the word terrified, and it's so clear that it's just not the case. So the only people believing journalists at this stage is, it's themselves. It's them. They're the only one believing they are wolf stories, and people are seeing through it.
Well, in fact, I think a lot of it really is just to generate clicks and attention and that sort of thing. I mean, that guy never got so many views as he got by telling the lie about being unsafe in Orania. I mean, and you've got to be, look, I appreciate that, the press is good and you're trying to be transparent, but at some point, it's got to be a little frustrating to see people just be blatant, outright hucksters and liars. You treat them fairly, you give them access, they come there, and then they distort a narrative. And then in this guy's case, he just lied. I mean, what was he afraid of? Scorpions? I mean, what's there to be afraid of in Orania? I mean, there isn't going to be enough, cook sisters, for snack time. What's the problem?
And all his fear. It's something very telling, and all the fear that these people arrive with. They never bring bodyguards to Orania. They never bring safety officers to Orania, but when they travel through other places in South Africa, they spend a lot of money having professional security, going with them, traveling with them, managing the risks. And then they say, oh, South Africa is such a beautiful rainbow nation, such a beautiful community. Yes, everyone is affected by crime. But when they come to Orania, there's never a single security guard, a single VIP protection officer, even close. And yet they try to portray the narrative. I feared for my life. I was so uncomfortable in such nonsense. So I think, as I said, in their deeds, they can't help but tell on themselves. So that was frustrating. I think also for the community, people feel like they're on a human zoo sometimes. But it also gives air to our message to say, even with all this noise, even with all this journalists and all this political noise, it is possible to still continue building a community and push forward and so on, and people appreciate it. Our international friends appreciate that. People get inspiration from Orania. Orania is in no means perfect, but it definitely inspired some other communities, other peoples, other groups, and I think that is positive. The message gets shared.
Well, I would have to agree with you. You know, as a serving Army officer, a lot of the senior officers, when I first went in the military in the early 80s, had a bad experience in Vietnam, how the press treated soldiers, and they had an instinctive revulsion at communicating with the press. But my approach was that if you don't communicate with the press, they're going to write what they want anyway. At least if you communicate with them, you'll be aware of what they're up to. And in this case, that's another reason why I did the CNN thing. I know exactly what they're up to. I can speak authoritatively about what they told me they were going to do and what they actually did. And even though I didn't make it into the documentary, again, I'm not a bitter ex. I'm happy about the documentary because they spent 4 minutes with Earl Musk, and I don't really know what Earl Musk knows about the demographics of America. That's not really something he's a subject matter expert in. But that's what Donnie O'Sullivan. And by the way, I don't know. Did you see this when he was walking around doing the video or doing the footage shooting with your folks there in Orania? But you could see it on the program itself, the look of disdain and the snarky looks on his face when he says things to communicate nonverbal communication, as if to undermine the person. He's about to ask a question. He makes a face to make it like, well, this guy's going to tell me something. It's just nonsense. Now look at me. See, I know what I'm talking about. Did you get that sense? Because you can certainly see it in the documentary.
Yeah, we have a saying in Afrikaans about that, but I won't share it on air. But people who think they are, very enlightened and very smart sometimes aren't. And I think we're kind of used to that look. But that the interesting or the ironic thing about it, the more sarcastic and they act, and the more they think they know better, and the more they think, oh, the crowd is only on their side, the more they tell on themselves. This entire premise of rich liberals living in glass houses, ivory castles, believing, oh well, it's not going so bad in my specific space in America where I have a multi-million-dollar house or whatever. Or it's not so bad living in my space here in South Africa where I live in a very, very luxurious estate with private security keeping me safe. So everyone's experience must be the same as mine. And from there comes that smug look, that I know better than you attitude, and that fails time and again because people on ground level can see for themselves what's actually going on, and they can see. Listen, this is not the full story. It's ironic that they call it the whole story, even there's so many holes in the story. It's just there's a spelling mistake that they made. They sort of taken the W out of the whole story. It's not that kind of hole. There's just so many holes in the story because people can see the experience of a person in a certain environment, a very exclusive environment where their richness can buy them safety and decency and so on. It's not the experience from everyone on ground level in South Africa and in the United States. And just referring back to what you said about knowing how these people operate, and your military experience as well. It's only an ambush if you don't know about it. If you know about an ambush, it's not an ambush anymore. It's just something you go into and you understand the effects. Doesn't mean everything is going to turn out perfect for you, but at least you have foreknowledge and you assess the situation a bit different, in my opinion.
Well, I would agree with you. And you mentioned ambush. It reminds me of the South African media's reaction to Ramaphosa's short notice request to meet President Trump back in May. And he went to the White House. He asked for the meeting. Trump arranged his schedule, rearranged it so they could host the South Africans on short notice. And then Ramaphosa shows up 43 minutes late to the most powerful political figure on the planet. Talk about, bad form. But then the South African media had the audacity to call that an ambush. There was no ambush because they showed a video. That's not an ambush. He should have known that was coming. But, one thing I didn't see in this documentary, particularly about Orania, when they talked about Orania, is the truth. And what I mean by that is the following. Orania is based on a cultural concept, not on a racial concept, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, while you have personally invited me and many Orania residents have asked me and invited me to come to Orania multiple times, and I'm not blowing you off. You guys just live too far out in the middle of nowhere. It's a long way to get there, but you've invited me. I know that I'd be very welcome there, but ek praat nie Afrikaans nie, and therefore, unless I improve my Afrikaans and maybe change my faith a little bit, I don't know that I can live there. And last time I checked, I'm about as white as driven snow here. So it's not about race, is it? It's about culture.
It is to preserve something of who we are. And I said it in that CNN documentary, but it did not. Donnie O'Sullivan. It's interesting. These people, their prime attack, their only offense is to say you are longing back to apartheid. You want the racial classifications, and then their entire worldview is based on race. It's just in another manner than other people's view. So they see these are the realities of race. Oh, these poor people of color, they have no agency for themselves because only if we intervene and save them, they will be okay and whatnot. But they can never quite get that idea in their minds of culture, of a specific group of people with a language, religion, traditions, customs, culture that wants to preserve that, to build that out and to live it. It's all for them to see, well, the people in Orania have white skins, oh, they are whites only community. No, we are more than just the color of our skin. They just as the South African government, use this narrative of non-racialism and so on just to push their racial agenda. That's what's happening in effect in real terms. For us to try and preserve something about our unique being, our unique traditions and customs, it's not something they can fathom. It's they just don't get it. And then they had the audacity to continue hammering on the fact that Orania is anti the Nelson Mandela Rainbow Nation dream. I think most South Africans is in the situation where they see, well, things aren't actually going as great as was promised to them in the late 80s and the early 90s. The country is in a bad space. World leaders don't want to attend the G20. So maybe some changes is necessary.
Well, it's not only Orania where I wouldn't be able to live right now. I mean, if I decide I want to live in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, in the Ingonyoma Trust, that's not really allowed. I mean, I'm not a Zulu, and so therefore I can't participate in another culturally aligned situation where the Zulu King controls 2.8 million hectares of prime farmland in KwaZulu-Natal, places I can't live. But I mean, it's not because I'm white, it's because I'm not Zulu. I mean, but I noticed that Donnie O'Sullivan and CNN didn't bother to go to the Ingonyoma Trust.
They did not, because they do not appreciate the cultures of South Africa. They much rather spend their time at a transgender African man who's lost access to HIV medication because of the fact that Trump cut USAID. So, and that was a quite significant segment of this program to say that, the American taxpayer is no longer funding these poor people's HIV medication for transgenders in South Africa. So rather than actually visiting the Ingonyama Trust, the Zulus, the traditional peoples there, or the Xhosa people, they just rather focused on the transgender issue. Very, very important, very important issue for everybody here in South Africa.
Well, they also are disingenuous about the whole situation. The reason that the gentleman doesn't have antiretrovirals is because the United States, since 2003, for 22 years, provided $8.1 billion to South Africa. But despite that, we're insulted by South Africa's government officials saying, the U.S., we cover most of the HIV. It doesn't matter. Yet when the so-called just 18% of the current amount of money spent fighting HIV for the world's largest HIV-positive population, 8.5 million people, when that 18% is cut off, suddenly there's no monitoring and surveillance programs. Without monitoring and surveillance, you don't know what's going on, and HIV spreads because you can't get a grasp of it. So, the U.S. is insulted. We give billions of dollars. And the reason this guy's not getting antiretrovirals is because, I don't know why, because we're not providing antiretrovirals anymore. According to the South African government, they're providing them. So why should cutting off the money for the monitoring and surveillance? See, this is all just propaganda on their part. The reality is the U.S. money does a lot more than what they claim, and also that the U.S. is the one who developed these antiretrovirals. Your pharmaceutical industry didn't do it. Aspen Pharmacare isn't developing these ARVs. U.S. is doing that. And without the U.S., these people would have all died a long time ago, sadly. And this is just I believe, from my view, the shameful effort by organizations like CNN to distort the story here. If the South African government had taken over responsibility entirely for this problem that was generated in South Africa by South Africans, then the American taxpayer wouldn't even have a role here. This was the president's emergency program for AIDS relief. Emergency. I submit to you, used it after 22 years. It's no longer an emergency. It's an enduring program.
And what's more is these same people going on that solidarity should not solidarity should not liaise to America. South Africans must solve South African problems, and no external influence is acceptable. Everyone must only focus internally. The same people want to go mad when they hear that these so-called external influences are no longer paying for the HIV medication. And in that sense, and it seems like on the one hand it's okay if their programs get supported by an external country and a foreign government, but the moment there are Afrikaner interests and Afrikaner efforts being supported, then it's a big problem. So, you can't have your cake and eat it, and that I think that is the thing here. And then communities like Orania, who's marching on their own accord, who's paying all their own service delivery, trying to develop with our own money, with our own funds in this semi-desert environment, starting things like the city building fund and the helping fund to try and develop here on our own accord and with our supporters. The end of the day, they take issue with that. They take issue with the effort on own steam, with friends obviously, but also take issue with the fact that they lose foreign funding for HIV programs and things like that after a long history of being very, very, very disingenuous and very aggressive towards the US and US foreign policy.
Well, in fact, the South African government has been very aggressive toward the U.S., while the South African media pretends that Trump is attacking South Africa all the time. Only this past week, when he started to sound like a Dalek from Doctor Who, extermination, is Trump actually attacking South Africa. The rest of the time, even then, he's just answering reporters' questions. He didn't bring the topic up. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell folks who are just tuning in. You're listening to the Indaba conversation with Joost, the CEO of the Orania movement, located in the Northern Cape. And we're talking about the CNN documentary that appeared on the 16th of November, Misinformation White Genocide, which was presented to me, and I suspect we'll ask you here in a second. It was presented to me as an effort to talk about South Africa on the eve of the G20 and touch a little bit. I think he already said this, and touch a little bit on the refugee situation. And they decided to go to Orania, and so that's why we're talking to you to get his perspectives. Yusuf, I've got to say this. I feel badly for the poor Nigerian/British journalist in the wheelchair who felt so scared the 10 days he spent there without bodyguards, fearing for his life in Orania. It must have been terrifying for him. I mean, having served in combat multiple times, I can only imagine what he went through. But seriously, I think you were in far greater physical danger walking through the streets of the inner harbor of Baltimore with me than that gentleman was in Orania.
Yeah, I do share that sentiment. It was, I think he was very safe here, very safe. I don't think a second visit will have the exact same effect. Citizens are not happy with him, and he asked me if he would be safe here, and I told him the only reason he would not is because of his profession, not his race.
Well, it's interesting. When you were with me in Baltimore, we went up on Federal Hill, which overlooks the inner harbor. That was a bit of a climb, especially with my hip now. It's falling apart. But climbing up those steps. And on the way back down, you may recall, you guys were a little ahead of me, but I stopped. You look back, and I stopped a couple of black folks who were coming up the steps.
Yes, I remember that quite well.
And it turns out they were from Burundi and the DRC, and they were talking about President Trump and singing his praises. I mean, and that's why I stopped them. I said, "Where are you guys from?" And it turns out they're Africans living in America, and they love Trump. I mean, I think that the racists would be shocked to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So very interesting, that obviously that doesn't fit the agenda. So the media, especially, big media companies, is not only supposed to, they have a responsibility to voice different opinions, right? So obviously it's fine if they want to voice the opinion of a transgender person in Africa who is a dissident against Trump, who doesn't like President Trump. That's fine, they can voice that. But there must be a balance. Why are people from Burundi going to the United States? Why are they actually going there, singing the praises of the president and saying, well, we want to live here, there's certain advantages for us here? Why is that version left out? Why? How is it possible that CNN and all its efforts, because we see on social media a lot of Afrikaners and a lot of non-Afrikaners in South Africa supporting the policies of the United States, President Trump, Marco Rubio and others, we see that there's a lot of praise going from multiple communities in South Africa, fed up with the ANC's corruption, fed up with the way things are managed, fed up with the political agenda, and those people's voices aren't heard. There's some people, crime is bad, but there are the massive amount of voices that we see every day on social media, critical on the ANC, critical on the way things are being done, concerned, fearing for their lives, wanting to leave. Why are those sentiments not voiced when mainstream media like CNN visit South Africa? Now we know the answer. It's because they have an agenda. It's because it's not about the G20. It's because it's not about farm murders. It's not even about misinformation. This is very clearly to push a narrative that opposes the narrative of President Trump, of some conservative leaders, of the Afrikaners. This is what it is designed to do. And if you look at it through that set of glasses, it's quite clear.
So, Joost, were you able to watch the entire documentary, or have you just seen parts of it? Because I know it was challenging for a lot of South Africans. I don't know if maybe they gave you an advance copy or access to it. It's now behind a paywall, a CNN paywall.
No,
But did you get to
I wanted
watch
to
it?
say luckily I was able, but I don't know if I can call it luckily. I don't think it was very well made. Not even as an opposing piece. You can have an appreciation for a piece that opposes your opinion if it's well put together, well thought out. I really thought they didn't come over very well. I really thought it was not all that well put together. And it's fine if they want to be critical on Orania. It's fine if they want to be critical on other communities or other peoples or other. I just don't think it's quite clear for any person living in South Africa that they never got a real grasp of what's going on. And what I mean with a real grasp of what's going on, I do not mean that they necessarily share my opinion, but at least have insight into other opinions and then make a respectable, calculated summary of the situation. You don't have to know everything. You don't even have to share my sentiments or other Afrikaners' sentiments. But it was quite clear that they never got that grasp. A journalist is supposed to be curious, and a curious person is supposed to research and seek and talk and ask until they get to a point where they somewhat understand the situation and then portray it. And that never happened. So I think it was not very well put together.
Well, that's my take on it too, Joost. I mean, what was the message they're trying to get across? It's obvious from the snarky looks from Donnie O'Sullivan and the snarky comments, and then the approach they took that this is really just to attack Donald Trump and to undermine the refugee program. But as far as cinematography and as far as a documentary, this was poorly edited, poorly put together. The selection of people involved in it didn't make sense. Ed Roots makes sense to have him in there, but Earl Musk makes no sense whatsoever. The only reason they did that is the name Musk so they could glom onto U.S. viewers because of Elon Musk. That's what that was about. But he's the last guy to be talking about, the ethnic makeup of the U.S. And that's not attacking Earl Musk. I'm just saying it made no sense. I mean, why are they in Arkansas talking to these hillbillies in Arkansas? I mean, I don't get that at all. That has no role here unless it's to paint a narrative. But even painting a narrative, it's poorly done. It's poor cinematography. It doesn't draw you in as a viewer. If you don't know South Africa, you're sitting there going, huh? What? Who are these people? I don't understand what's going on.
Yes. You hit the nail on the head. I think the words that captured it the best for me right now is that you said, if you don't know South Africa, you do not have a better idea about what's going on in South Africa after watching this. You do not have a better idea. There's no deeper insight. What there is a lot of focus on the narrative that they want to attack. But there's no deeper insight into South Africa. There's no statistics in terms of this is the situation. This is how this changed from this to this. And because of that changes, these people are reacting in these and those ways. And that gives a viewer perspective. Statistics and opinions on statistics clearly distinguished. That gives a viewer perspective, but that was not what they were doing, and it shows. So for us, who's got a pretty good grasp on the situation here, for you, who's got an intelligence background and been talking on South Africa for a very, very long time, when we watch it, we see it as a certain interpretation. But the average American that maybe does not know what the political makeup of South Africa is, what the legal makeup is, I don't think they are more enlightened. They just see some people, these people are bad, and these people are and those are suffering because of the boogeyman policies of President Trump kind of rhetoric. That's what they saw. No new insights, sadly.
No, I think I hit it on the head, and you've articulated it very well. The problem with this, it doesn't add any value to the narrative, to the situation. It doesn't inform the viewer. It just runs with racial tropes in an effort to cause a racial narrative and make a racial divide. So let me share my experience, Donnie. Donnie. Sorry, I'm calling you Donnie O'Sullivan. Ooh. I'm no longer welcome in Orania after that faux pas.
Visa revoked.
Damn it, I've got all that Orania currency. What am I going to do with it now? Okay, no, but seriously, sorry about that. Yeah, so let me share my experience with Donnie O'Sullivan. So they asked me to go down there, and I flew down, and the producer, very nice gentleman, very polite. I don't know if you got to meet him, Ken. Lovely guy. He was excellent and honest with me about what we're doing down there. Anyway, they wanted to interview Earl Langton, and I was told to be a 45 interview. An hour and 45 minutes later, while I'm standing around, with the heat along this river, in down there in Alabama where it's humid as all get out in summertime, and we're waiting for this to end. An hour and 45 minutes later, they finally say, okay, we're done. They wrap up. Earl takes off and goes home. And then we drive to a local community down the road about 8 or 10 kilometers away. We go to a primary school, which obviously, if they scouted out, they did a very poor job. They're supposed to scout the locations. That's one of their tasks. So they actually went out to the ice cream shop, or the little, it was like a tuck shop, but like a little burger stand where they did Earl. But the place I went to was a primary school. They sat me down under an overhang for picnic tables. There was a generator or a lawnmower mowing the grass, something. It was very distracting noise. They put me in a very uncomfortable situation. They wired me up with the sun shining in my face, the heat pouring down. And then he asked me questions. It was very obvious to me. Look, I'm a law enforcement official as well. I've interrogated people, and also a journalist. As a journalist, you don't make your person you're interviewing uncomfortable in a setting where you're sitting down. You make them as comfortable as possible because you're trying to elicit information to find out what's going on. But if you're interrogating somebody, you want to put them in the sun. You want them in an uncomfortable spot where they can't focus, where they have distractions so that they can't, create a narrative or tell a story. So that's what they did to me. And it was pretty obvious to me as Donnie O'Sullivan asked me the questions that I wasn't going to be in the documentary, because he asked me things like, so what gives President Trump the right to bring farmers over? I said, well, first off, it's not farmers. What do you mean? Well, this is not a program for farmers. Well, Afrikaners. It's not a program for Afrikaners. No, but it is. No, it's not. If you go to the U.S. Embassy website, since the 10th of February, it clearly states racial minorities in South Africa suffering from unjust racial persecution. I can show you the website, za.usembassy.gov. And so he didn't like that. He says, but what gives him the authority? I said, well, the Immigration and Nationality Act 1980. It's federal law. We've brought over 2.6 million refugees since 1980 under this law. And by the way, most of them have been people of color, so-called black and brown people from around the world. Yes, but Trump wants to bring white people over. I just told you it's not just white people. It includes Indians and coloreds as well. And nobody seemed to have this problem when 300,000 Ukrainians poured into our country last 3 years uncontrolled. They're white. They're Christian. So why are you upset about South Africans? I knew I wasn't going to be in the documentary.
You did not react in the way that he hoped in terms of setting it up in such a way that you are uncomfortable. And I know that you are normally very well prepared and so on. So just a bit of preparation and knowing, as I said, if it's an ambush, but it's an ambush, it's not an ambush. Then you have facts to counter these accusations and these attacks, and that helps a lot.
Well, it's interesting because there was an outside chance, and I'm looking to see if my phone rings, but I doubt it, that I would be asked to be on Sky News in the UK today. But I think they probably researched me, and now they're afraid that they'll lose the argument. So I haven't heard from Sky News yet. But anyway, they what gets me about this, Joost, is that now in the CNN case, I will give them credit in that they were planning this documentary for months ahead. So they should have done a better job. So I'll give them credit, not for doing a good job, but for planning ahead. But all these other news organizations, whether it's the Daily Maverick or it's Sky News or these other, they wait till the last minute. Like, for instance, Sky News is doing a story about the G20 summit, and they yesterday reached out to one of the refugees in the States and said, hey, we'd really like you to come on this program we've been working on tomorrow. I mean, look, a breaking story, there's a fire, a traffic accident, an earthquake, you show up, you ask people. But when you're doing a story about an event that's been planned for over a year, that's a massive international news story, and you wait till the day before you run a story, that's not an effort to a story. That's an effort to get somebody on camera who's uncomfortable and get them in a gotcha moment.
Gotcha moments, also a very good articulation of what these people wanted. Another way that this really have taken form is remember that the CNN guys spent a lot of time in Orania. Well, in terms of the amount that was actually broadcasted, I think it was 2 days. Constantly we were interviewed, right? So from the get-go, from the first coffee, from the tour, from the everywhere we got out, we were mic'd the entire time, and constantly there were conversation going on, right? From that, they cut it very, 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 very short and threw away all nuance. And what did they publish? 2 parts cut out and latched together, right? And that was the Twitter gotcha. Without the nuance of a conversation, enduring conversation of a couple of hours with nuances. And at the end I said, listen, here's an honest answer. This is the cultural makeup of Orania. This is how people will react to something. That's the honest answer. But here's a whole bunch of context. So obviously that doesn't make the cut, because you just add 2 parts together and you put it on X, and there you go. And that is to create a narrative. That is to push an agenda. Exactly what happened. So the gotcha approach is definitely what they are doing. As a matter of our own policy, I think we should definitely start just recording all the interviews as well, and just publish it the moment that the big news organization publish something like this. I think we should do this. It's a lot of effort, because they've got teams and teams and teams working with all the material and so on. But Return to the Land did this, and I think with good success. And I think we should just do that as well.
Well, I was going to suggest that, this is one reason why I record all my interviews. Also, the fact that YouTube got my channel off a couple of years ago in the middle of an interview with Gary Gold. But I record the interviews so that when people make false allegations, I have the raw footage. I have terabytes of data backed up from the almost 2,000 interviews I've done in the past 6 years, just because of that reason. So it is a huge effort on your part, and I don't know if Orania has a media outlet or a media organization or public affairs people. I imagine you do, but it might be something to consider going forward, that when these people come, you also record. And if they want to come there, they have to consent to you also recording. And that way you've got something to refute when they lie.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they are hunting gotcha moments, and we are trying to portray a complex and nuanced story of a people, of a place, and of a project, including things like trying to convey our system of own labor, convey the development we have done, try to explain the local relationships that we have built with great success. Many communities in South Africa, like the Xhosa people of Manyameni or others, they wouldn't know how bad the situation is if CNN isn't telling them. So they have a good relationship with Orania. They support Orania. Just recently, a Xhosa chief who were very supportive of Orania sadly passed away, and we had a relationship with him with a signed memorandum of understanding since 2012. 2012, yeah. So that kind of narrative just doesn't fit in this gotcha journalism. It just doesn't fit in there, and I think that is the main concern.
So what was your biggest disappointment, other than the obvious, hack job? You gave them access for 2 days. This requires a lot of coordination, a lot of time on the part of the management of Orania to facilitate these people coming there. So is there any disappointment on your part of what didn't go in the documentary?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say necessarily some specific phrase or so. It was just it's not that we want a larger chunk of the bigger documentary for Orania purposes, and so I think the viewers weren't interested necessarily in seeing the HIV funding being cut and nonsense like that. I think it could be more relevant to share stories of people in South Africa, not just Orania, but in South Africa, Afrikaners in South Africa, the people. Maybe more people who are thinking about refugee status, people critical of the regime, people who've been affected by the race laws. That is the issue. But from our part, I think that a lot of nuance got lost. A lot of good, open, honest conversation. We've always been open to honest conversation, and yeah, it's just been cut out. So it's irritating. I would say irritating is a better word than just disappointment. Um, we will continue to host journalists. We do not plan on cutting them off totally. I've said no recently to some crews that I just knew what their intentions and their narrative were, and I just knew it's just going to cause issues, and nothing good can come from it. But for the rest, we will continue to host people and try to convey our story. And hopefully, 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 or 1 in 50 will be somewhat fair. And I think that's good enough for us.
Well, I would say in this documentary, outside of speaking to Errol Langton and outside of Orania, most of the people, including when they went around and Donnie O'Sullivan tried to, get a lot of credit by following in my footsteps and doing pothole repair, something I did in Port Elizabeth a couple years ago. Other than that, everyone they talked to was an elite. An absolute elite. And I think that the most shocking thing that came out of this for me, I don't know what's your thoughts on this, but basically the foreign minister of South Africa, at a time when South Africa needs to get 30% tariffs lowered and they don't have an ambassador or a trade negotiator or a trade delegation in Washington, yet they lie to South Africans saying they are negotiating the trade deals. At a time when the relationship was particularly fraught because of actions of the South African government, the Minister of Foreign Affairs calls Trump a white supremacist and says America has a white supremacist agenda. I was like, I'm not shocked, but I was still shocked that they actually was dumb enough to let that get put on air.
I think this is inherently a communist or socialist way of thinking, right? And I'm referring to the guys who produced this. They think the message they must convey is to say, oh, look at these poor people losing their HIV medication because of Trump not giving them more money. Another way of thinking would have been the following. If we could stimulate the economy and let the economic opportunity develop by, for example, having successful businesses in South Africa not subjugated to 30% tariffs, people will have more spendable income, and for that reason, they will be able to take care of their direct circle and their people and their families, and the effect of that available currency, that available money, that available economic value will have a ripple effect through the country. More people will grow economically and there will be more options for people to support themselves. So on the one hand, you have the socialist communist way of thinking, we must get more funds for HIV medication. On the other hand, people just ask for an opportunity to get their businesses, to get the things that they produce in their factories not subjugated to these tariffs, which is a punishment for the ANC's crimes, not for the business owners' crimes. Not subjugated to these tariffs, and then they can develop and they can do things and there can be economic growth. But they are not thinking in that manner. They are thinking in this socialist way of thinking, and that is the one of the prime issues as well. Not only with the economic policy, but also with the way that the producers are thinking, and they allow the foreign minister to say these things. I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's all tapes. I think we all saw it leaked when he said things about taking white people's land if they don't behave themselves and stuff like that. So when things like that comes out, trust goes down, investment goes down. People do not want to invest, and for that reason, you kill the economy of a country, and it go even worse. And then the poor HIV people have even less access to medicine and treatment and care. And that's what they don't understand.
Well, that's a different perspective and a very valuable perspective to look at it. But I have an even more basic and simple perspective, look at it from a U.S. taxpayer. President Bush created an emergency program to bridge for 5 years to help countries in the developing world, in particular 85% of the money spent in Africa for PEPFAR, President's Emergency Program for AIDS Relief. It gave a 5-year bridge to help them get their own systems up in place and fund these programs. Why is Africa's most industrialized and wealthiest economy, not largest, but wealthiest economy and most industrialized, 22 years later, still suckling off the teat from my wallet for their own responsibility? What responsibility do I bear for people with irresponsible sexual behavior and those who are unfortunate through the circumstance beyond their control become infected with HIV? Why is that my responsibility 22 years later? That's another perspective.
Yes. One should at least have the opportunity to decide where your tax money goes. Better yet, not tax dollars at all. If people want to contribute to a project in Africa, they should definitely have that option voluntarily.
Yeah.
Voluntarily. I am very thankful for our American friends, for example, supporting maybe development in Orania. Private people maybe giving a few dollars here and there to help develop Orania, which is an effort to become less dependent on other people, less dependent on governments and institutions. So if you want to voluntarily contribute to projects in Africa, it's fine. But it must be in that fashion and not forced. And what's even more unfathomable is the idea that the moment that privilege gets taken away because it's misused and the government is acting hateful, then these people get all angry. How can you take your tax dollars away from me? That's not fair.
Well, I'm being a bit unfair here, forcing you to speak English in self-defense. So let's talk to something you know exactly very well. Let's do that. That's easy for you to focus here. So in the time we've got left, can we get a little bit of an update about Orania? Because let's talk about the truth about Orania. You know, we've already mentioned it's a cultural organization, and you know, if you're culturally aligned, you can apply, and then you can wind up living there. But the community has grown significantly. I don't know the current figure, if it's like 4,000 or more residents. You also were going off grid. What's the progress in the off grid? And you talked about a few funds that people put money into. I assume that's voluntarily, so they can raise money to do different things. How's it going with the infrastructure? Have you built yourself yet an international airport? What's going on in Orania? We would like to hear from you, rather than just, you know, it's a racist organization of the descendants of apartheid who want to segregate South Africa. Sorry, I mean, that's kind of the narrative that they run.
Oh no, it's concerning these things. The people you hear from politicians and journalists all the same. So in terms of Orania, I think it's going really well. We've recently published the Orania census, and saw that in the past 4 years we've grown with a third. A third of our current population moved here in the past 4 years. What's also exciting is to see the growth in infrastructure. Past 2 years, what we've done with growth in terms of energy independence, and people are investing in that, which is really exciting. We give a good return on investment. Prime Plus, which is I think 12% something. For investments in our energy independence project, and that's really, really exciting, because that is a way for us. I say even in that documentary that there's no self-sufficiency, political self-sufficiency or political independence without energy independence. So it's something quite exciting. We've managed to get Orania about 50% off grid, in the sense that, well, maybe not off grid's maybe not the right words, but about 50% energy self-creating or self-generating. And another way to phrase that is to say 50% of the money spent on electricity is not leaving the community, it's circulating. Very exciting stuff for us. We need to grow that, needs to become 100%. We also have the battery system, which is exciting to many people, especially your viewers. I know you're well informed on this as well. The idea of load shedding in South Africa, it will return sooner or later, rolling blackouts. So to have the battery for the town, to make sure our economy can continue going, continue working, even if South Africa's electricity is offline, that's also very well. We're building some new roads. I can post some pictures on that maybe, or share it on social media again for people watching this to see. Another very exciting sector is education. Both our schools, our primary and secondary schools, as well as our college, for the first time next year, very exciting news, they are going to do a diploma in civil engineering, technical diploma in civil engineering, full time, quite exciting stuff. Very soon, students will make up a major part of Orania's demographic makeup, in terms of double-digit percentages. So that's quite exciting, and that's also going to bring a lot of economic value into our community, given that these are people coming in, they come to study, they pay for their classes, they pay for their housing. We learn them skills, they socialize and live in Orania and so on, and that's very, very, very good for our economy as well.
Now, is there any chance, since you're along the Orange River, that anyone's dredged the edge to see if maybe there's some diamonds out there? I doubt it. They're probably at the ocean, but just a thought.
Last time we found diamonds in the area, we had the British Empire all over us, so we won't make that mistake again.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, you don't want the Brits floating around, so that's probably not a good idea. You'll keep that to yourself.
I guess nowadays they the British state at least is not much of a concern anymore. They are facing what Paul Kruger called the Uitlander kwessie, or the non-citizen issue, with the Brits pushing for them for voting rights. Some of the non-citizens inside the Republic of Transvaal caused a lot of issues for Paul Kruger and his people, the president back then, in the Boer republics. And now the Britons are facing that exact same challenge with mass migration and people with voting rights just taking over their communities. So that's a whole other conversation, but it's interesting. History always comes back to bite you.
Well, it is interesting where you guys are located, kind of remote from places. I remember a few months back, the EFF in the Northern Cape decided that they were going to protest and march on Orania, not realizing where the heck it was. They discovered that there weren't really any buses or KFCs on the way there, so they went to Uppington instead. So I think your remoteness protected you from the EFF showing up on your doorstep.
Yeah. But they went to Kimberley, marched there, made a lot of noise with the chant "Orania must fall." Very interesting because, for example, the EFF promised that if they weren't able to build one school in a 5-year period, then voters must never vote for them again. Well, I think it's about 8 years later now, they've not achieved a single school, while Orania's got 2 schools, two other preschool institutions, a college that will grow into a university and so on. And now they chant, for our demise, that we must fall. And they chant, kill the Boer. So it's just, very strange times.
So what about something that's always near and dear to Afrikaners' hearts, rugby? Have you got a rugby league going there in Orania?
The students play very good rugby with the total influx of young 19-year-old men that work physically hard and so on. Our rugby really is making a good comeback under the good coaching there at the Bokaroo Sports Institute. Our rugby and our netball clubs are doing well. They are playing different places in the country, but they're performing well, and it's a long shot from where it was 10 years ago when there was just not so many young people. The influx of young, fit, sporty people really help us to also drive that culture. We've got different sporting events, both internally and people going out to compete and so on. So our rugby is doing well. You have a bit of a soft spot for rugby yourself, don't you?
Indeed, I do. Going back to 1982, quite a while. Became a Springbok fan in 1982 and a Western Province fan shortly after that. Yeah, so it's been a long time thing for me. But you mentioned something that's worth exploring before we wrap up here. You mentioned the influx of young folks. Do you have a sense of what's driving that? Is it a question of a longing for culture and affinity for community? Or is it a question of safety because South Africa just isn't safe? Or is it a combination, or is it some other factor I haven't considered?
Both of what you mentioned, and just another very practical one is just to say Afrikaans kids have less and less opportunity to study elsewhere in their own mother tongue, and they don't feel safe on campuses. I think there are 32 tertiary training institutions in South Africa. Not one can you do a degree in Afrikaans anymore. I don't mean the subject matter. I mean having it as your instruction language. It's not possible anymore. Many of those built by Afrikaners, and it's getting very aggressive. At the University of Bloemfontein, for example, internal email recently leaked where the rector just said, listen, stop all Afrikaans, no more classes, it's not welcome, it's the language of the oppressor, and nonsense like that. So these people, these youngsters coming to Orania, they want to study in Afrikaans, they want to learn in Afrikaans. So what we have is we've got good professional training. That is, I think, the first and qualifying thing. Secondly, the slogan of the institution is the campus without walls. Now, I don't know how it works in the United States. In Europe, many university campuses are integrated into the community, and you have got classes kind of all around town, and you move freely around town. It's not the case in South Africa. The campuses are walled. very high walls, and you've got, you have to swipe access control cards and things just to keep the kids safe or the young adults safe on campus. In Orania, the community is part of your campus. It's open and you can move around. So it's firstly the good training, secondly campus without walls, and then I would also say what you mentioned, the idea of culture, singing the songs of your people, doing the activities that you like, and so on, also very important.
Well, the U.S. is a little mix of that. We do have some, because of circumstance, like Columbia University in New York City is right in the city, and you have classes in different places around. But most American universities and colleges are on campuses. In fact, many of them, most have their own police forces and law enforcement that are responsible for activities. Because you can imagine these are small cities. I mean, I attended Ohio University as an undergraduate, and it has 23,000 students on campus in Athens, Ohio. Oh. And it eats up great geographically at least a quarter of the town space that falls within the city limits. But that's all campus stuff. So they have their own law enforcement and that sort of thing. So, it's a mix of things here in the States. Someone asked an interesting question here a short while ago, and maybe this is good for branding and also for the expansion of Orania, about offering those sort of things online for people around the world who want to learn Afrikaans. Because you have people in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, UK, even the US who have offspring who are Afrikaners but may have been born abroad, and they want to retain their language. They want their kids to learn it. So is it something you thought about?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been talking about it. We do not have that option yet, but I think it's definitely something we should prioritize. Also, a lot of non-Afrikaners or people without Afrikaner backgrounds that just want to learn the language. It's an interesting language. It's a quite easy language to learn. Once you've mastered the vocabulary, it's not that tough to learn the rest. And you can just definitely hold a conversation just with a good idea of the vocabulary. We've seen it many times. Swedes coming here, Germans coming here, learning Afrikaans. So I think it's a nice language to learn, and there's a lot of people speaking it. So we should offer it. I think definitely that's a good idea.
No, I think so as well. But look, I'm gonna disagree with you about it being easy. It's an easy language to learn. I don't disagree. I can read Afrikaans. I understand it. I mean, I can watch Afrikaans TV. I used to watch Stephen Talon, But the thing is that the pronunciation is brutal, my friend. It's tough. I mean, and you get these little troublemakers, these fanboys from Port Elizabeth named Ronaldo Chuz, who's always criticizing my pronunciation. But to be fair, because German is a phonetic language and it's my second language, I do speak Afrikaans with a German accent, which I'm often told. Yeah. So
no. That can't be. It can't be that tough. I think you are overemphasizing. I could speak it when I was 3 years old. So how tough could it be?
Oh, come on. You better be able to speak when you're 3. I was speaking English when I was 1. You better learn Afrikaans by 3. All right. Joost. All right. So the topic here was to get together and discuss your experience with the CNN documentary, which I think we both agree was a very confusing documentary. What was the message to American viewers, because it was targeted for an American audience? You watch this, you come away not with an understanding of South Africa, but with a clear idea that they hate Donald Trump.
Absolutely. It's an attack on policy. It's to instill fear on people supporting, current conservative policies in the United States. It's to delegitimize some of the concerns that Afrikaners have in South Africa, and it was not at all informative, really, in any sense, for people with limited knowledge about the South African situation. So, all in all, I would not give it a very high score.
Yeah, I would rate it pretty low
objectively.
Myself. No, I agree. It's subjective. I mean, look, and again, in my case, that's why I go to great pains to point out to people that I was included in the project, but never made it into the documentary. And my feelings aren't hurt, because when I saw the Twitter preview clips of it, it was pretty obvious that this wasn't an attempt to discuss what they told me they wanted to do. So I'm going to give you the floor, as I always do to my guest. Joost, any last comments you want to share, either about the documentary or about South Africa, or about Orania, or I don't know, anything you want to share? The floor is yours, sir.
Well, yeah, so as always, thank you very much for the opportunity to have a good conversation. I would just say the following, and that's to say, South Africa and the world is complicated. There's a great deal of study that needs to go into understanding complicated things, and some people have the appetite for that. But we must also be able to package what we believe and what we stand for in very simple terms, so that when it comes to policy, you can always fall back to that. For us, it's our religion, it's our culture, it's what we believe. We do not intend to leave South Africa or Africa. We believe we belong here. And in that sense, we believe if we want to be masters of our own future, in a human sense, if we want to make sure that there is something left for the next and the next generation, the responsibility is on us to create it. And we will not be intimidated by journalists with an agenda trying to push us into certain corners. We understand what needs to be done. We need to build. We need to create a future. We need to put down brick by brick, put that down, and we must just continue doing so. And these things will come and go. The noise, the politics, the journalists, they will come and go. In the end, we will look back. Have we managed to build something sustainable? Yes or no? And that is the question. Thank you for all the support from Americans, from people in the United States, supporting us politically, financially, investing in our projects. We appreciate that a lot. Thank you for people like you giving us a voice as well when CNN is, delegitimizing us. And thank you for all the people supporting Orania.
That's my pleasure, Joost. Bye, donkey. Have a lovely day. We appreciate you coming on the program and sharing your thoughts with us, particularly about this this documentary, which I call more of a shamumentary. It really wasn't much of a documentary. But thank you very much. I wish you a good day.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I'll let Joost drop off the stream there, and I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. So he'll drop off. So thanks for tuning in. Do appreciate everyone watching the program today. And there you have it, a fair treatment of the Orania movement. Again, it's a cultural effort. It's not a racial thing. And that's what's lost because it doesn't fit the narrative. People have other objectives. Anyway, it was good having him back on the program. And he reminded me the last time I saw him was actually here in the States in Baltimore when I went down there to meet with him and also with some other folks, including Ernst Ritz. And I showed them around, excuse me. So program announcement, the news will be on in about an hour. I haven't set that up yet. I'll do that in just a moment. And after that, we have another refugee interview. Lydie van de Plas will be on the program, someone who's garnering a lot of attention with her videos about being in America. And we finally made contact. She'll be on the program. So we'll be talking. That program will be on at 7:30 South Africa time, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. So 9:30 Pacific in the morning for those out on the West Coast, the left coast of America. Thanks for tuning in. And thanks to my guest once again. I hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't done it already. And we will see you, hopefully, for the news. And if not, maybe for the refugee interview. And that's going to do it for this session here on the Indaba Conversation. You guys take care of yourselves. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And we'll see you shortly. Cheers.